Great. So thanks to everyone who's able to be here today as well. I know it's been short notice, so really appreciate you being able to take time in your evening to join this. So my name is Aisling. I'm quite new to Keep Scotland Beautiful. I've joined the communities team as the Community Climate Officer, and my role is specifically to focus on this project to deliver community climate action plans until March 2022, the end of March 2022. It's funded this project at the moment. We're also joined by Juliet, who I know lots of you already know through either the Beautiful Scotland programme that Juliet's in charge of, or also the It's Your Neighbourhood programme. And we're joined by my colleague Heather as well. Heather's going to be taking some notes for us. She's a project officer in the communities team. And so Heather will be noting down all your questions as well. So if we don't get to your questions in this session, it's not a problem, because we will endeavour to answer them all. We'll just make sure that we do it by email afterwards, or once we send out these slides. So we're going to try and I'm going to try and not take too long to describe the project initially, just because we are going to send all of these slides out as PDFs with notes afterwards, and there'll be some links to further research as well. So hopefully you won't need to take any notes either. So next slide, please. Cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is just introduce Keep Scotland Beautiful as a charity. I know most of you will know who we are, but some of you might not. And even for those of you who do, you might not be engaged with any of our projects at the moment, or if you have, it's always good to just have a quick refresher on what our strategy is and who we are, what we're trying to do. And then I'll go into what the Community Climate Action Plans project actually is, what it means, who we're looking for, what we're offering and what we're asking for as well. And then we'll move over to, I'm going to pass over to some colleagues at two communities who've already taken part in the Community Climate Action Plan, in sort of pioneers of the project, really. And we'll be joined by representatives from Sustainable Tayvallich. We're joined by Nils and Kira, and we're joined as well by Kate from Future Kirriemuir. And these guys were really like the driving forces of their own community climate action plans, and the whole communities there were really involved. So hopefully they'll be able to take part in the Q&A session as well. If you have any questions directly for them, that's also great. But we're going to try to leave as much time as we can for the questions as well. So with that, I'll ask to move on to the next slide. Thank you. So who we are, Keep Scotland Beautiful is your charity for Scotland's environment. So we've got three main strands to our work. The first strand is to help combat climate change, and obviously this project looks at that. The second strand, which we're probably most well known for, I would say, is the reducing litter and waste strand. And then the third is protecting and enhancing the places that we care for. So whilst this project is about combating climate change, it's also about protecting and enhancing the places we care for. It's definitely a community-minded focus, hence the name. And we're looking to incorporate how climate action can provide lots of co-benefits for communities as well. So through climate action, you can also enhance the place that you care for. I think that's one of the driving forces of this. In the chat, there's a link to the About Us page for Keep Scotland Beautiful, and I'll put that in the notes as well. And that's basically just if you're not as familiar with us. Cool, so next slide, please. Okay, so coming back to that first strand of combating climate change, this particular project is provided as part of Scotland's COP26 community engagement programme, and it's funded by the Scottish Government. As I said, we're funded to work on this project for a fixed term until November, the end of November, thinking like, don't know what November is, the end of the year, March 2022, unfortunately at the moment. So basically that means that this is a short-term project, but we're looking to work with 7 communities within that time, and we're looking to basically work quite intensely with those communities over that time to help develop a really good plan. And we will also be providing support and knowledge about further funding opportunities after that time to help those plans that we will hopefully have in a really good state by the end of that financial year. Have those plans help people take those plans forward in their own communities. So I think it's worth just touching on the fact that this is all part of the drive for Scotland to become net zero. The Scottish Government's target is to become net zero by 2045. And by net zero, I mean, most people have come across this phrase, but just to touch on what that actually means, essentially, we're mainly about reducing our emissions as far as possible, but where emissions are still happening within the sphere of Scotland, they should be offset by other areas, whether it be by carbon capture from trees and peat, or whether it be through carbon capture technology, which is currently not a viable technology. So that's why it's really important for us to focus as communities and individuals and organisations on the ways in which we can reduce our emissions as the primary way that we're trying to tackle climate change. And that's the focus of this project. Next slide, please. So this is a slightly grimmer slide than all the others, but we just thought it would be relevant to set a bit of context as to why we're all here today. I'm sure many of you have come across much of this information and these kind of images before, especially around COP26 as well. But we do think it's relevant to make sure that we're all on the same page about these things. As I say, there'll be more links that we'll put into the notes, which will provide sources for these particular facts, but also some sources for further investigation if that feels like something that you need to do or want to do. The one thing I do want to just briefly touch on is that we've had some mention earlier about some of the people who've been affected by flooding recently, but vulnerable neighbourhoods are overrepresented in areas prone to flooding, particularly coastally. And so the power of community climate action plans is hopefully to build resilience in those places and build resilience for people who need it the most. We're really interested in tackling climate change, not just through mitigating the factors that cause climate change, but also supporting communities to adapt to the effects of climate change, which are already locked in. And part of our training will also deal with building a wider knowledge of the context of climate change as well. Cool, next slide. Thank you very much. So how do communities come into that, and how do we tackle that as communities, this kind of seismic issue? Well, the changes that are needed are obviously quite huge, and they need to not just be top down, but also bottom up in our societies, and that's where communities are really impactful. So a lot of the changes that we're all asked to make are changes as individuals, but some of those changes that we need to make are made as communities, and even the ones that we make as individuals can be just magnified when we all come together. I think one of the things that's most important to note is that a lot of research shows community climate action is some of the most long-lasting and impactful because it's coming from the people and not being imposed upon people. And that's a really big part of this programme, is that it's not our climate action plans. It's very much an idea that the people we're working with and the communities we're working with are really hoping to come up with their own climate action plans, and we're here to provide you with the knowledge, the support, and the build confidence in people and facilitate that process. We really want climate action plans to be unique to the places and the people that we're working with, and it's all about going with what it is that excites people and making a creative and inspiring process so that it can last. That's a really big factor of this. Cool, thank you very much, Juliet. Next slide. So what is a community climate action plan? So we've touched on it slightly, and I think most of you will have seen some of this already, because this is on the website, and we have we'll put a link to the webpage in the chat as well, which gives the most information about this, and it also has a link to our application form if you haven't seen that already. But one thing that's important to say is that all of this is there's an element of flexibility about this project. We want to see who applies, and we want to make sure that the people and the communities that we're working with, we're kind of shaping the way that we run this project around their needs. So, but one thing that's going to be the same for all of them is that the aim of the project is to turn the ambition of those communities and the people within those communities into climate action. And we're here to just help make that process happen. The way that we'll be doing that is by looking at inspiring people to basically think about what would their community look like in a low carbon future, what would they like their community to do for them as well, and then see if we can draw those two things together and work backwards to build a plan. So it should be a practical process, as well as inspiring and fun and creative and involving and hopefully an inclusive process as well. Next slide, please. So some of the kind of nuts and bolts of the whole affair. So we've got funding to work with 7 communities in this particular round, and we're hoping to do around 7 sessions with each of those 7 communities. Most of those will be delivered virtually online. That being said, there's scope to work in person with communities later on in the process when we're getting towards more of the kind of specific planning stage, especially if that feels relevant and like it will be beneficial to the communities. But we're just going to see how things go with that. And we also need to be mindful of the government's guidance towards the pandemic as well. So that's why at the moment we're saying that this is going to be virtually delivered. We'll be delivering sessions at a time that suits people within the communities, essentially. So if that's going to be a Friday afternoon, that's fine. If it needs to be in the evening, that's also fine. We're here to try and make this a process that invites as many people as possible from those communities to be involved. Each of the sessions should be about 1 to 1.5 hours each, but there is we do ask that people can do a bit of prep work in between, and that could be just watching a film or doing a bit of reflection, or there's some activities that we have as well. And it's really just about trying to get the most out of this process within the time frame. That's something that the representatives from the 2 communities who are here today, they did that as well, and hopefully, and I think they'll agree that it helped to deepen the process and really get the best value out of the sessions. So we need to be looking to start late November or early December, because we want to make sure that we've got 2 or 3 weeks break between sessions, so that lots of people can join, and it doesn't feel like too intense a commitment, but also there's time for people to do that work in between, and just, it's flexible around people's lives, essentially. Cool. So next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of what we need from you, we do need a commitment from the community, and a commitment from a core primary contact person within each community, who will provide kind of a key link between Keep Scotland Beautiful, myself, and the communities, helping with my help to organise the sessions and get people involved. We're looking for a core group, as well as just a key individual who can help sort of own the project and get as many people involved as possible from throughout the community, and hopefully reach people who might not have got themselves involved in climate conversations before. That would be really exciting as well. And the contribution of local knowledge and contacts that you can bring will definitely help to make this a more meaningful and valuable process, so we can make each climate action plan unique to the needs and the wants of each community as well. In terms of what we can offer, it's obviously staff time. I'll be the facilitator of all of those workshops, so it's the same person who you're meeting from Keep Scotland Beautiful each time. Other members of staff will drop in and out to support as and when that's needed, but it does mean that you have a consistency, and I think that's really important to the value of the project. But we're also here I'm supported by Keep Scotland Beautiful with all of the wide knowledge that has been collected over the years in terms of climate action, community action, and the knowledge of funding opportunities and different contextual opportunities for your communities. And we'll be here to provide all of that help and those kind of resources throughout the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a link. We've got a link here to the main webpage for the community climate action plans, but we'll pop that in the chat as well. And for anyone who is watching a recording, hopefully that will be in the notes. We'll have that in the notes as well. And if anyone has any anything that they can't access, just email me at any time if you've got any other questions about the whole process and what's involved. The application process, we're hoping, is quite an accessible one. It's basically what we need is just your answers to a selection of questions in one Word document. We're trying to make sure it's accessible because we know this is a tight time frame, and we really do appreciate that. So we want to make sure that it's not too daunting a prospect. We just want to get to know who you are, what your key interest in the project is, and where you want your community to go with this, because it's quite a bespoke kind of approach that we want to take with this. Lovely. So I'm going to hand over now to Nils and Kira, who are representing Sustainable Tayvallich, and they are if you're not familiar with where that is, it's a lovely coastal place in Argyll and Bute, and these guys have been sort of champions of their particular community climate action plan, and it would be great to hear from them just a bit about how that's gone for them.
Great, thanks, Aisling. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so we worked with KSB last year. When was that? November?
October, November
2020 through to the beginning of 2021. And we were slightly behind Kate, who's also here tonight. We were, I think, hot on your heels, Kate. So Kate was really the real pioneer, and then we were sort of following up, and I think Alan, who was the officer at KSB, was sort of learning as he went with Kate's project and applying things on the hoof to us and things. So really great process. I guess where did we start? We started with the jam, I suppose, maybe is a good word. So in 2019, so we're both designers, Kira and I should say. Problem solvers is maybe a better way to put what we do. And in 2019, we ran an event, just a 1.5 day event in our village here in Tayvallich, which was the Tayvallich Sustainability Jam. And it was really just making space within the community to talk about some of the problems that we all kind of felt about sustainability and look at what kind of solutions we might want to do. And obviously it wasn't about making those solutions happen in 1.5 days, but it was a space where we could come together, and instead of talking about the things that we all normally talked about with our neighbours, we were talking about sustainability. So I think from that point of view, it was just valuable to have that space, and that's probably then what led us to what led you to apply to KSB when you saw the opportunity came along to do the climate action plan. I don't know if you want to talk about the application process.
I don't know. There's something to say about the application process.
I guess it was. Ashley mentioned the kind of, it wasn't too onerous, which is.
Oh no, yeah, no, that's true. No, it made it very, very simple. And I guess it'd been indicated to us by somebody else that Tayvallich was maybe a suitable community. I don't know, maybe that's something, Aisling, that you can give again a bit of an indication of what sort of communities you might be looking for. And it might just be that you have a broad, you're looking for a broader range of people this time. But I guess what KSB was looking for quite sensibly in the sort of pilot phase was a community that was maybe a different size from Kirriemuir, because we're already working with Kate. So Tayvallich is really small. There's only 200 permanent residents, and is very rural. And so it was good. It was a good fit from that point of view, and also because they knew we'd done the jam, then there was already a bit of appetite. We were working with Nils and I were both supporting another local group, local to Argyll, Time for Change, who through that then they were aware, KSB was aware that there was people in Tayvallich that had an appetite for this. So that's how that got started.
And I suppose there was an appetite, but we weren't yet already doing things, so that was kind of a good fit. And yeah, so off the kind of through the sessions, there was quite a good engagement from the community, about 10% of the community, so about 20, maybe sometimes up to 30 people were attending each session, which was felt quite a good number of the community. And we also engaged more widely with the community, which was also felt quite important, partly because we could only meet online, and that was a barrier for some, and also just because we were aware that we weren't getting all the voices in there. So we engaged more widely through putting out physical surveys. So we actually went around people's doors, which again, I suppose is quite easy because it's a relatively small village. And yeah, generally felt like the kind of process of having someone external come and be a kind of a guide, a facilitator, like Aisling said, was quite valuable, in contrast maybe to us having facilitated the jam. And what else to say? Well, at the end of it, then we had the plan. We had a document, which was our community climate action plan, but we quite quickly kind of moved beyond it being a document, and we created a website, which we didn't spend any money on. It was a free site that we put together, but we just kind of had all of the actions from the plans. We kind of cut a lot of the text, if you like. We shortened it and just had a lot of the actions from the plan there, so that the community could access them and the community could see what they might want to do. And it wasn't a case of anyone saying this is what anyone has to do, but it was a kind of a menu of things that people within the community might want to get on board with if it was something they were particularly passionate about. We have since then, so Kira and I have kind of said, right, well, our action that we'll take on is to just create that space once a month. So we've had a monthly meetup on last Tuesday of the month, every month since then. And sometimes that's involved bringing in people to kind of share something that they're expert on. So we had a permaculture expert, and we're going to have someone from Zero Waste Scotland, and various people. And sometimes it's just been about the community coming together again and having that space where instead of talking about what we all normally talk about as neighbours and friends, we have a focus on sustainability. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. There are people within the community that are taking actions, sort of small and medium, I would say, at this stage. Some things are happening, some things are not happening. Just there isn't anyone taking them on yet, but we're kind of plugging away at it, kind of in our own time, I suppose. And
I guess where we've come to is that rather than so at the end of the sessions with KSB, we had this plan, and like Neil says, it was like a document, like a thing. But that's, you know, and Alan was always the officer at the time, was always really sort of clear, like that's only as good as it is in the day you write it, and it almost instantly becomes invalid. And I think the whole community is really taking that on board. Like there's definitely things in it that we're now moving forward with, but there's other things in it that maybe somebody will one day, but not for now. And where we've ended up as a kind of collective is there isn't an organisation that is sustainable Tayvallich. We really wanted to avoid committee like death. And there's already so many different committees in our community that, you know, and it's always the same people that end up on them, and basically all that happens then is you end up with a group of people that everybody else is looking to say, well, why aren't you fixing this thing? And we absolutely didn't want to go there because tackling climate change is something that we all have to work on at every level of every part of our lives all the time. So we didn't want to put it, you know, say, okay, well, that's just this committee's problem. So kind of the approach we're trying to take, and something we're, and I suppose this has been a journey to try and help the community to understand this, but Sustainable Tayvallich is a movement rather than an organisation. So all the bits are out there. There's this monthly, like you know, there's like tools and resources and logos and that kind of thing. There's this monthly get together, but otherwise there's nobody saying like, this is what we're going to do, this is when we're going to do it. It's actually just individuals and groups of friends, residents, neighbours, whatever, coming together to say, do you know, this is something that I'm really passionate about and I'd like to try and get off the ground, and then going away and doing that, which has been successful in getting some things done, and I think there's bigger kind of probably like capital cost kind of projects that we haven't gotten to yet. However, by having this kind of movement and starting the conversation and holding these conversations, the other groups that are already constituted in in the village are starting to pay heed to the fact that there is appetite and demand for this within the people that they represent. So as an example, the local village hall is looking at planting an orchard on their land. There's also talk of various renewables projects on community buildings, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's where it's landed at the moment.
I think we should probably stop there, otherwise we go on all night.
That's fantastic. Thank you both very much for introducing your project, your movement. And I think that's a really interesting thing to ponder on, is that you're a collective and not a movement, and why you've chosen to do that. It's really interesting. So I'll pass over to Kate, who I've now been corrected is the pioneer of this, actually, in the pioneering group in Kirriemuir and Angus. And Kate, if you could just give us sort of 5 to 10 minutes introducing your wonderful project before we move on to questions. Thank you, Kate.
Yes, well, that was lovely to hear from Ciara and Niels about, because we've talked to them, and Alan has talked about all the work you've been doing before, and it was lovely to hear from you anyway. So yes, we set up, well, a bunch of people, it always starts with a bunch of people got together in 2019 who were worried about the whole climate and biodiversity crisis, and we wondered as a community what to do. So we had a meeting, we did set up an organisation, and yes, sometimes I wish we hadn't. Yes, committees, they're a tricky beast, but out of that we did start a lot of work, and we ended up with, we got Climate Challenge Fund funding, which is, I think, how Alan kind of knew about us. So we were doing climate related growing and food waste work when the opportunity to apply to become to do this community climate action plan arose, and I leapt at it, to be honest, because it's the way I always think we need to scale up all the time with all of this in every part of every community. And I can only say it's been a really, really good thing for us to do. And when I was sort of thinking about what to tell you, as you all think about going on this journey, one, it's amazing, you should do it. We need everyone to do it in every town. How do you choose who should be on it? The right people are the people who turn up. So, and as Niels and Ciara said, really anyone who has an interest, however they want to take that interest forward, is the right person to do it. So we started off as a community group, and then we set up into little subgroups after when, Connie, I'm speaking, right? Shut up. And we had meetings with Alan, and after that finished and we had the draft plan over this number of months, then we split up into 4 separate little groups. So we have stuff on biodiversity, on growing, on waste, on travel, and we now have a kind of landscape group that are looking at bigger scale climate action in woodlands and soils. So, and now those groups meet once a month and we have a list on our website of actions that anybody can put forward, things that they want to do, so that, if you write it down, you have to kind of commit to it in some way, and every month you come back and it's the same group of people. Obviously it's open to anyone in our community, and they can come back and say, right, has this moved forward? Are we keen to carry this on, this growing, this biodiversity thing, whatever. And it is lovely in that people who are interested, you follow the energy. You know, if nobody has the appetite to do a certain thing, and when you go through the climate action plan process, there's this fantastic bit where you get this pack of cards and it's got all the options that lots of people have done, and you think, oh, I like to do a bit of that energy stuff, or a bit of this insulation stuff, or a bit of this community growing stuff, or community orchard. And certain members of your community will love these ideas, and you pick those cards, and a few months later you think, do I still want to do this? Yes or no. And it's lovely and flexible. And any of you can do it. It's not difficult. It's just about who you gather together and what you decide to do. And then there is a little bit of community cohesion, hopefully. I would say you want to keep it as flexible as possible. You know, some people can't make all the meetings. Some people are interested in only one thing, you know, biodiversity or growing or whatever. But all of the resources that any of you will need are already there in your communities. And what KSB do so beautifully is to kind of get them together and let that come to the surface. But once you've been through that process, I suppose the thing is, how do you keep it going, and in what way do you want to do it? And that is the good bit. That's up to you all to just run with it. And we need all of it. You know, COP26 tells us that we have to do more of it now. So yeah, yeah, that's all I think I can tell you. It's good. You should do it.
I mean, I could not have said any of that better myself. That's fantastic. I really like, I've written down some of your phrases. I really love the right people are the people who turn up. And so that's just a lovely sentiment. And I really, I thank you and both Nils and Kira as well for joining us.
Well, it was something as part of the process. I kept making lists of people I thought we should have. And then every time they would just be busy with something else, or they would not have the right, you know, whatever. And then I just got to the point where I just thought, oh, actually, we don't need them. We have the people we need. The people who are interested will come back and the other people will fall away. And that has to be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the spirit of following the energy is a big part of how I know these guys both engaged with the project, and also how we'll be planning to continue with this project. So yeah, and thank you to Juliet for doing the slides, but I'll pass back to Juliet now.
Okay, so I have the great job of, so now it's a question and answer session. So I'm gonna keep an eye on you all. So if you've got a burning question you want to ask either Aisling about the programme in general, or Kira and Niels or Kate, anything really, just either physically raise your hand and I'll look out for you, or use the raise hand button, or put your question in the chat and I'll keep an eye on that. Or if no one's speaking, just unmute and ask your question. So yeah, over to you all. Oh, Kate from Blainsley and the Borders.
Oh, hi. Thank you. This is really interesting, and thanks for your interesting summary of what you do in your local projects. I was trying to think about the movement rather than an organisation, and was that something deliberate from the start, or did that organically evolve when you decided, hang on, we don't want to end up with a committee and all that goes with it? I like the idea. I think it's great. I was just wondering if you did it from experience or got your fingers burnt and moved to doing a movement.
I think it was sort of organic. I think there was a moment, maybe the thought hadn't crossed our minds, and then there was a moment when somebody kind of asked, should we be an organisation? And there was, you know, people are thinking, oh, it's time for us to become an organisation. And I think probably the pushback to say, no, let's be a movement did come from Nils and I, because we have in the past been involved in and we're both like love a committee on many committees, all about committees, but we just felt that this was something that couldn't be compartmentalized, and it risked being that, and that our community, many are, is already saturated with committees, and it's the same people that are on all of them, and there isn't enough people to join new committees. Everybody's burnt out on them. Yeah. So
we're a small community as well, so that's why I was sort of thinking that I quite like the idea. And the second question I'll let for both yourself and Kate, what kind of, I mean, I know you've had some ideas, but what kind of ideas, what worked and what hasn't? I know you're still in early stages, but it's interesting. We're also pretty small, very rural.
I think that sorry, I'm not muted. I think that some of the things that have worked really well here are, and I think it's relating to the fact that we are a movement, there's, for instance, one person who was particularly driven to do lots of foraging stuff.
Okay.
And so she's organised like 4 different weekends over the summer that have all been fully booked for people to come and do foraging with local experts. It's something she'd wanted to do for ages, and she just didn't have, like, she was scared that like nobody would turn up. And when she saw there was appetite and there was, you know, people might come, then she was like, great, I'm going to go for it. Other things have happened like that. Recently, we recorded a song. I don't know if anybody's seen that song that's going around for COP26. We recently recorded for that, and that was again because somebody was just like, oh, if I put a sustainable Tayvallich badge on this, people will think it's a thing, and come, and they did. And then also more practical things have taken place. Like we got a bike maintenance stand installed.
Lots of little things in one big kind of project.
Yeah, and again, actually, I think that's been one of the successes, is that again, I think that KSB were very much like, it's better to achieve lots of little things than to not achieve big things. Okay. And we'd had big projects in the past where, you know, 1 or 2 people were really excited about putting a wind turbine in or whatever, which is great. Would love to see it. It's a massive piece of work and has a lot of sticking points along the way. And so not achieving that and like burning people out on trying to get there.
Right, okay.
It's maybe worse than the small things. So again, it's like, where is the energy and the appetite? But I think we really learned that sometimes actually, and especially in the first instance, like this is our first year, I think it's been great. We've done lots of small things, and I think it's building momentum to a point where we could, in years to come, tackle some of these bigger things, because everybody's just like, yeah, what's next? Like all these successes.
Okay, got you. Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey, Kate, do you want to add anything to that? No,
that sounded fine. I'm just aware you've got lots of hands.
Okay.
15 minutes.
I'll go to the next one. So Rachel from Reunion Canal Boats.
Hi, yes. So you've sort of answered this a little bit already, and I don't have a very well framed question at all, but it was sort of around sort of managing expectations of, we're all sitting around talking, and how does that translate to actual projects? So obviously you've said a bit about, you know, just doing little things and building up to stuff, but we would be applying as sort of a lead organisation, but with other organisations. So yeah, I think you've mentioned a bit before about how not trying to make a particular thing someone else's responsibility or something. So just wanted to hear a bit more about sort of the expectations of people involved, or the community, or, you know, that kind of stuff.
Kate, do you want to go first?
Shall I try that? I suppose if you have, the collaboration is really, really useful, because if you do need to get some money, the more you've collaborated and worked with people who are already doing related things, it's really handy. But it also, you see how much crossover there is, and it gets you to where you want to be much quicker. If you can say, right, the food hub are already doing something, but we can add into that. Some other members of the community might help them have a garden. Like we have a community food hub, which kind of set up during COVID. And then we were supposed to do all this stuff on food waste, and we couldn't do it in the schools because the schools were shut. So we started with the food hub, and all the supermarkets, the Kirrie supermarkets donate food, and we've saved 20 tons of food, redistributed it. And that there was no funding involved in any of that. It was just speaking to people, sharing ideas and getting it done. And it really, you know, it's all done by volunteers. That's an amazing thing, I think, to achieve. And then from that, we've worked on food. The food hub then made up packs for kids out of school who could do cooking at home with food, some of this food that was going to waste. So we had cooking kits. We've done that with some of the young carers groups. So it was like, a great thing is to look at all the resources in your community. So the buildings, the people, the knowledge, all of that stuff. And you kind of say, right, what have we got? And you can start doing things for nothing just by joining up that in a better way.
Thanks, Kate. That's great. Shall I move on to the next question? Is that all right, Kira and Nils? Right. So Our Place Camelin, your hand was up next.
Well, my name's John Hosey. I work for Our Place Camelin in Tamford Hill, just outside Falkirk. It was really just to set a context. We have my business is community safety, but I support a group called Tidy Clean Green that are involved in various environmental work, from litter picks to community growing. But our community, it's characterised by at least 3 areas that are in the top 5% of social index of multiple deprivation. And there's one group in particular taking on a building, going through asset transfer. And it seems that climate change will drastically and disproportionately affect communities like ourselves. It was usually just about advice about how we submit this application, because we have pockets of things going on from community growing. We've got food pantries in the area. Is about how this plan could maybe galvanise a lot of that. And I think buildings and asset transfers would be something that's highly significant to our community. Is that would such an action plan be something that would be useful to us? It would also, I think, engage people that have never been engaged in this kind of discussion before about climate. It just wouldn't be seen as a priority, but it is a priority.
Aisling, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you very much for that point and for giving us a bit of context as well to Camelin and the groups that are already there and the difficulties that people are facing. And I think it's also really, really important to think about this as an opportunity to draw a lot of people into climate conversations who've never done that before. I know that that's something when I've spoken to other people who've engaged in this project is that people came along who they didn't expect to come along, or people who they might not have heard talk about this issue start talking about it. And that's really important, because we all start with the conversation. But in terms of submitting the application and how that relates to your context, I think it's really important to contextualize it within all of those social indicators of multiple deprivation and not see that that's not a hindrance. When we're talking about you have all of the resources that you need to start acting, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a place that is as full of actual resources as anywhere else. It means that we're here to draw upon the strengths that a community might not know it already has in terms of relationships, in terms of competencies and skills, but we're not here to suggest that communities that are overwhelmingly going to be the most affected should not be supported from without as well. And this plan should be, it's the beginning of a process, and we would love to help it be something that we can carry on with momentum later and support as a kind of beginning of something where you can start to look at things like getting more land and more assets as part of in community ownership, because as you rightly point out, that's a really big part of resilience building. So we would absolutely love to see an application from a place like Camelin. And in terms of it being an opportunity to pull all of those things together, that is something that we can support for the right community and the right application. And yeah, we'd love to work with a wide range of communities. We've got 7 communities that we're funded to work with, but we really want to make sure that we're not just focusing on one type or one geographical area or one size. We want to make sure that it's as broad a spread as it can be with 7, which is obviously not as broad as it could be, but it's broader than we started with 2, with 7 now. We'll see where we can get to, but yeah, we'd love to see an application. So thank you so much for being here as well.
Thanks. Craig from Shots, you're next.
Thank you. Thanks for the great presentations. Just a bit like John, just to give a bit of context for kind of Shots, I'm coming kind of representing kind of 2 areas, wearing 2 hats. As I work within Shots, so I work for my kind of local community development trust, Getting Better Together, and my role there is active travel coordinator. So I'm very much involved in a lot of the climate action that's taking place within the area. I do a lot of kind of climate work within my job as well. So we do a lot of kind of green recovery through transport, active travel, community transport, so the electric vehicle, a lot of stuff with our community garden, and stuff like that as well. But as well as working in Shots, I live in Shots as a kind of resident. I'm on the kind of community board, so it's that committee level stuff as well, so that's happening. And within the kind of community boards, North Lanarkshire's got the kind of strategic document, the plan now. It's a lot of regeneration and investment in the towns, and we've come up with these strategic plans. The new community boards have been formed and they've been set priorities. One of the priorities that came out of the community board was environmental issues. So, loving a committee, the community board set up the kind of environmental subgroup. The same as the old kind of community council and stuff, it's the similar people that attend, and it's very exclusive to older people, we would say. People which maybe get more time in their hands, go to these meetings. It's no pulling in a lot of younger people into the climate conversation. And it's not like a lot of them would say, oh, I'll join a community board meeting, or that's a subgroup I want to be part of. So I think, like Neil's and that touched on, in terms of a movement, that I think a community action plan that really ties in all the work that's been done, that kind of pushes it as a bit of a movement where more people can get involved and make it that discussion rather than this kind of community, kind of pumping out. It's like a local outcome improvement plan where we've got actions and milestones. It's more council driven. It doesn't bottom up level stuff, and it's quite frustrating because it's obviously tied in at the strategic level with this North Lanarkshire Council plan, hitting their targets, environmental stuff, and it's quite frustrating in that sense. So I think we need to kind of get rid of this committee stuff, get more of a movement. So I don't know how you feel about and obviously if we've got an environmental group already, but there's obviously an action recording plan already kind of being done, be developing that. And I think experienced climate officer is kind of what's needed in the community, because that's really no one that's been there to take that forward.
Thanks, Craig. It's really interesting to hear that the concept of the movement actually is something that resonates with you as well in your community. And I think it's worth noting that there'll be some communities who that's really appropriate for, and some that maybe a committee is more appropriate for, and anything's good. But it's really interesting to hear that you also feel that that's a good way to engage young people, because it makes sense, doesn't it? And I think it's about building confidence. I think if you're to take the approach of seeing this more as a movement, it's about making people see that they already have the capability to do something and take action, and that sustainability and environmentalism and taking action on the climate actually, like, it applies to whatever your passion is or whatever it is that you do on a day-to-day basis. It's not like a siloed activity. And I think one thing that's just worth noting, before I pass over to Kate and Nils and Kira to pick up on that point, is just that this project is very much about it being community owned, not council owned. So whilst we would invite local councillors if that was something that you wanted or your community would like to be part of the process, it's not owned by the local authority, it is owned by the community, and it is that's why it's different to some of those other types of projects. So I would hope that slightly different focus brings an opportunity to bring in people who might not have been involved before, and lots of the ways to do that are through showing the co-benefits of climate action. So, it's not just about talking about it as climate action, but saying we're doing this stuff that's good for our community because it makes it look nicer, and we build relationships, and there's something fun for us to do on the weekend, and like look at all these beautiful flowers and veg that we planted, and suddenly we've all got bikes and everything. And this is not all about framing it as a climate conversation, but it is climate action at the same time as building your community. So sorry, that was a bit of a wordier answer than I'd hoped, but Kate, have you got any thoughts on that, or Nils and Kira?
Yes, two thoughts. One is the council has to do a lot of this stuff, so we've used it as a lever to get the council to identify areas of land across Angus that more people can do community growing, and they're beginning to address producing local compost for all growing across Angus. And you can hold them to account by saying that a bunch of us want to do more of this, and they have to comply. So it's a really good lever to get your council on board. the other thing is that it's just really nice for communities to do this, and however suits you, it's a good thing to connect communities. We've gone, so when the community climate action plan was generated, we then decided that we didn't want to call it a community climate action plan because that was quite intimidating and put a lot of people off. So we just called it Future Kirrie, and it is just about making our town better for people in lots of different ways. So whatever works for you is good. But yes, that's how we interpreted it as well.
Ditto, Kate. We became Sustainable Tayvallich quite quickly and moved away from having a climate action plan because it sounded a bit scarier. And you're going.
I was just going to say, and I think it sounds exclusionary, like it's like a plan that was made by some people for some people. And I think again that's the benefit of this movement idea. Like there's not this like exclusive group of people who think it's cool to hang out in a community hall and talk about this stuff. If you are interested in taking action, you can take it. I think something that's been really interesting is that like I still get emails from people and I feel they're asking for permission, and all I have to, then my job is to say, yeah, go for it. And then they go away and do stuff. And then there's still also a big job to do to help people feel that they can get to that point of like taking on the movement, but I suppose taking on an action within the movement. But I suppose in the message we just keep putting out there is like no action happens without you taking action.
And I think that the default position is for people to expect there to be a committee that does that thing on behalf of the community. You know, that's what happens with our community hall is owned by the community and run by a committee that deals with it on behalf of the community. And that's great. It really works as a model for the hall, but it doesn't work for climate action, or we think anyway. So so I think that will probably just be a constant thing for us, is people emailing to say, are you doing this? Are you doing X? And the reply is kind of more like, well, are you thinking about doing something on that? And here's how Sustainable Tayvallich as a movement could help you. You know, you could share it on our Facebook group, or you could come along to one of our monthly meetups and share it to see if there's anyone else with an appetite for that. And I think so far, kind of specifically in response to you, Craig, we've done a lot of really small things that have probably had a very small climate impact. We're not measuring, there's no one paid here to measure this and benchmarking things, but if we were measuring, I would say it's probably very small. But I think the community impact has been great because we're just doing things that people are turning up to. There's a space and they're not, it's not being forced down their throats, and it's bottom up, like you said as well. So. And
I just wanted to say on the council point, like I was wary that we would do work on the council's behalf basically, and that they would then be able to say, well, we've got this great community called Tayvallich and they're doing all these things, and when actually there's a lot of work they need to do. Something KSB helped us with was liaising with the council really well, and we already, through the group I mentioned, Time for Change, had one councillor who's an independent who was quite engaged in this stuff. He's been really helpful because he's an independent. He's not necessarily towing the line of the council. He's not necessarily against them either, and he can give us the inside scoop on how things work. So finding him has been a total godsend. And then I suppose like I said, we didn't want to be their like poster child because there's so much work the council needs to do in all sorts of areas. But we have established a fairly good relationship with the council and with individuals in the council, and now know, like, you know, if there's something needing sorted with a particular thing, then we know who to get in touch to with, and different people in the community know that as well now. So that's been a positive relationship building council thing.
I think it's also because it goes on over a certain amount of time, you just get to trust people. That's what builds trust in a community. And then as you do more of it, people come back and they kind of say, oh, well, I've just been mulling this over for a while. And then you'll find things just grow. It's amazing.
Thanks, Kate. There's no more raised hands, but if anyone just wants to unmute, if you've got a burning question they want to ask before the end, we've probably got time for one or two more. So just unmute. Oh, I love Cole. Yeah, Fiona and Charlie, do you want to ask your question?
just going for an unmute there. Hi, I'm Charlie from the Isle of Coll. I just wanted to ask Nils and Ciara about their core group and how they opened out to the community and whether they organised things in the village hall. Obviously, you had your sustainability jam the year before, but as part of this process, did you go to the community and really open up this process?
Yeah, so we never had a core group. Like right from the start, there was never a set of people that were the people. We it's fairly easy. We're very lucky. There are only 200 people that are permanent residents, and we have a couple of communication channels that most people in the village are in different ways linked into. So there's a Google group, a Facebook group, and the village notice board. I mean, yeah, it's pretty easy at this scale. So we put out a message in the first instance, and maybe like 35 people came to that first call, and loads of people said they couldn't, but they'd like to know what happened. Had the process described, and then at the subsequent sessions, I'd say there was a pool of about 30 people that came, and at least 20 of those would come to the sessions, but kind of like a different group of people each time. And then we also found other ways to, as you say, make sure the community was as involved as, like, different people were as involved as they could be and wanted to be. So lots of people were interested but couldn't come, so we just really tried to like put out information about what was happening all the time. And I guess that was our role as the like coordinators, if you like we had to do lots of communication legwork. That's been our biggest job, actually. And then we also there was like a survey that Alan put together. It's the Place Standard Survey. It's like a Scotland thing for measuring like how people are satisfied with different aspects of their community. And he also added in some climate questions to that. So we sent that round digitally. We had printed copies in the village shop. Again, there's only one shop, so like most people go in there at least once in 2 weeks, you know. Had a huge response from that, had like 80 responses, again out of 200, pretty good. And we also had like, we put postcards around just telling people what was going on with like links to the website and the Facebook group, that kind of thing. So not everybody engaged, but many people did. And we had a group of people that had been coming to the sessions. Maybe about 6 of us went around with postcards to put through people's doors, but we knocked on every single door. So we actually had quite a few doorstep conversations. Didn't necessarily hear from any of those people again, or most of those people again, but we did have lots of positive conversations where people were interested, supportive. They're not necessarily going to turn up, but they gave their sort of general support. So that answers your question.
That's great. That's fantastic. I mean, Coll is very similar to Tayvallich in terms of size and population, and you know, a lot of the ideas that you just said there are the kind of things that we're thinking about too. So yeah, thank you.
Great.
Oh, sorry. Time for one more question, if anyone has one. Nope. Just unmute if you do.
Is Kate from Blainsley?
Yeah, hands. I think it's a hand up from before, maybe, Kate, or if you got another question.
Sorry, that's not.
Okay. Aisling, do you want to round it up?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for coming, for their thoughtful questions, for giving us your time in your evening. But I particularly like to thank Nils, Ciara and Kate as well for your insights and just giving your honest perspective on what's worked for you, what hasn't. Really, really appreciate it. It's really makes the process for other people much better to hear from people who've been part of it, not just from Keep Scotland Beautiful. So that's really gives the essence of what the whole project is about, really, which is that it's about communities owning those projects, and we're here to help shape that, facilitate that, give you the confidence, give you the skills. So yeah, hopefully lots of you will want to apply, and if you have any other questions that come up now, later dates, just pop me an email, and if we can, I'll answer them. If you've got any questions that you want me to pass on to anyone else as well, then yeah, just always email me and I'll see what I can do. And thanks to Juliet as well for facilitating everything.
Welcome. Thank you all very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your
Thank you very much,
evening.
guys.
Yeah,
Bye.
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 Bye.